Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. I don't have much time. If anyone finds these recordings, please publish them through independent sources, make copies, and protect yourself. My name is Dr. Andrew Boone. I'm a microbiologist and immunology specialist, formerly contracted by the Department of Defense. Right now, I'm hiding in an abandoned house. No one's found me yet, but I don't know what will come first, being captured or no longer being human. The boards over the windows won't hold for long, but maybe they'll buy me a little time to think and to piece together how this all began. At first, I planned to keep a written journal, but my vision has been getting worse by the hour. So I'm speaking into this old digital recorder I salvaged from a second-hand electronics store. If I leave behind my story, maybe it'll keep others alive, or at least warn them of the real threat. It's better than letting everything vanish with me, because according to my calculations, I might only have about 72 hours before I turn into something else. Let me start at the beginning, or at least as far back as I can remember with the clarity I have left. 2 months ago, I was stationed at Fort Detrick in Maryland, where the United States Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases is located. I'd been working on advanced immunotherapy, originally intended for cancer research, but we quickly pivoted to a classified project known to only a handful of top scientists. The official memo called it Project Varanus. Unofficially, it was a field test for a novel pathogen that supposedly could be weaponized for strategic advantage, an airborne virus that targeted specific genetic markers. The chain of command insisted it was just research, but I knew better. That's what they always say, right? We were told to keep everything on a need-to-know basis. I wasn't told exactly who authorized the final experiments, but the rumor was that certain higher-ups had demanded real-world trials sooner than we were prepared to handle. I can't confirm any of that. All I can confirm is that we were flown to an undisclosed location in an unmarked C-130 cargo plane. It was heavily guarded. I remember the black cargo nets and the constant hum of the engines overhead. They said we were headed to a remote test site near the Great Dismal Swamp between Virginia and North Carolina. But after we landed, I realized we were much farther south, in the Florida Panhandle near Eglin Air Force Base. The mismatch in flight times told me we weren't in Virginia. The constant hush by the armed escort told me we were in a place that didn't officially exist. The plan was to release the virus in controlled conditions on a population of lab animals and monitor how quickly it spread. We were to gather data, measure the infection rate, and see if the virus mutated outside the lab environment. Right away, something about that operation gave me chills. You don't need that kind of secrecy if you're just testing on animals in a controlled environment. Within 48 hours of arrival, the entire team realized we'd been lied to. A group of individuals, I don't know if they were volunteers, prisoners, or unsuspecting civilians, somehow ended up exposed to the virus. We were assured that these people had signed the appropriate waivers, that they were all terminally ill patients seeking experimental treatment. I had no way to verify that. They certainly didn't look like patients with critical illnesses. They looked terrified. The day I saw them escorted into a quarantine tent is the day I started plotting how to get out, or at least how to collect evidence. It's important to note that I never intended to blow the whistle, at least not at first. I'm a scientist. My job was to collect data, but once I realized actual human beings were being exposed to an unknown pathogen, my moral obligations overrode my contractual ones. I began taking notes on my phone, snapping quick photos of test results, patient charts, anything that might help me understand what the virus was truly capable of. Things spiraled much faster than any of us had predicted. Within 24 hours of exposure, the test subjects developed fevers and disorientation. By hour 36, they were delirious, with signs of aggression and confusion. By hour 48, at least half of them showed advanced necrotic tissue around old wounds that should have healed. And by hour 72, well, Let's just say they were no longer the same people. Their eyes looked cloudy, and they seemed to be operating on pure instinct. They were violent. We had never seen anything quite like it outside of sensational rumors. It was a viral strain that attacked the brain's neural pathways, but somehow kept the host's body functioning. It was horrifying. That was the moment the suits came in. Uniformed personnel with no insignia marched into the compound and took over. They forced half the science team, myself included, into a locked lab to continue monitoring the newly infected. We could hear screams from outside, though we were never allowed to check. They made us sign additional non-disclosure agreements, as if those would matter in a place like that. Despite my best efforts to follow the chain of command, I realized the people in charge had zero intention of developing a cure or containment method. They wanted data, pure raw data on how effectively this virus could spread. I confronted one of the project leaders, Colonel Peterson. He just told me, "This is bigger than you can imagine, Dr. Boone. Don't interfere if you value your life." That was enough to keep me in line for a few more days. But it didn't matter how obedient we were. Once the infected started overwhelming security, we found ourselves on our own. There was an incident, an unscheduled power outage. The electronic door locks failed. Backup generators kicked in, but it was too late. People who had been in observation got loose. The entire facility descended into chaos. Sirens, red flashing lights, the works. I tried to keep my colleagues together, but panic is contagious. Everyone scattered, and we lost track of who was infected and who wasn't. In the confusion, I was bitten by one of the infected test subjects. I never even learned his name. He lunged, sank his teeth into my forearm, and I felt a jolt of searing pain, like someone pressed a hot poker against my skin. I managed to shove him away, but the damage was done. Blood poured down my sleeve. That's how I got it. The virus. My fate was sealed. I made a tourniquet with my lab coat, grabbed my phone, a few vials of experimental inhibitors, and ran. I never looked back. The next few days were a blur. I recall seeing Special Forces soldiers flooding into the area. I recall hearing bursts of gunfire echoing in the corridors. I recall overhead announcements telling all survivors to proceed to designated safe zones. I didn't believe any of it. They were either rounding people up for termination or forcibly quarantining them. Maybe both. Eventually, I managed to slip past the perimeter, thanks to a drainage tunnel that led outside. That's how I ended up hitchhiking north to Virginia. The only reason I made it that far was because the infection was slow to take hold in me. My best guess is that prolonged exposure to various immunotherapies in the lab had partially inoculated me. The symptoms appear slower in me, but they're appearing nonetheless. It's only a matter of time. That was a week ago. Now I'm hiding, trying to stay ahead of what I call the cleanup crew, the men in black gear who seem to appear in black SUVs with tinted windows at random. Every time I think I've found a safe place, they show up within hours. They're systematically silencing anyone with knowledge of the experiment. They want the outbreak contained, along with any inconvenient witnesses. But it's not just them. The infected themselves are starting to appear in clusters in small towns along the East Coast. I've seen glimpses on local news segments before the stories are mysteriously pulled. I suspect the virus is no longer contained to that single Florida test site. It's out. The government is desperately covering it up. Listen closely, because I'm going to walk you through everything I know about this virus. How it started, how it spreads, and what it does to a person. But I'm also going to be upfront about what it's doing to me. Because if I black out, if I lose myself, at least this record will remain. Let me talk about the blackouts. They started 2 days ago. The first time, I was trying to cross a back road just south of Petersburg, Virginia. I felt dizzy. Then I woke up 30 minutes later lying in a ditch. My watch told me I'd lost half an hour, but it felt like only a second. The second blackout came earlier this morning, while I was scavenging for food at a diner that had shut down. I snapped out of it to find myself in the kitchen, a cracked plate in my hand. I have no recollection of what happened between entering the building and that moment. I fear these blackouts are going to get longer and more frequent. That's part of why I'm recording this. It's not just for posterity, it's to keep track of my own timeline. If I can't remember where I've been or what I've done, maybe my recorded words will remind me. The virus is extremely aggressive once it enters the bloodstream. It targets the brain, specifically areas responsible for impulse control and higher reasoning. Over time, it essentially hijacks the autonomic functions, forcing the body to operate in a hyperadrenalized state. Victims become stronger for short bursts, less responsive to pain, and driven by what appears to be a primal hunger. I refuse to use any sensational term like zombie, but the signs are all there. The body keeps running, even as the mind is consumed. I mentioned my immunotherapy background. It's likely the only thing slowing down my complete conversion. My daily injections of a compound I helped develop, let's call it serum AB3, are buying me time, maybe even stalling the virus's spread in my body. But I only have 3 vials left, and each shot lasts about 12 hours. That's not enough. I might make it 3 more days at most, before my supply runs out. Now let me explain how the cleanup crew factors into this. They're not just here to take out infected individuals. They're after anyone with intimate knowledge, like me. I first encountered them about 5 days ago, shortly after crossing into Georgia on my way north. I found an empty warehouse to sleep in outside Savannah. It was still dark when I heard the rumble of vehicles. I peeked through a crack in the wall and spotted 4 large SUVs. Men in tactical gear fanned out, scanning the area with flashlights. They moved with professional precision, silent and systematic. They had advanced equipment, night vision, suppressed rifles, everything you'd expect from a special forces unit. They had come for me. I barely escaped. Crawled through a hole in the fence and sprinted across a field. My lungs burned, and my heart nearly jumped out of my chest, but I kept going. I avoided the main roads after that, taking side streets and dirt trails whenever possible. But they found me again near Fayetteville, North Carolina. I was scavenging an abandoned gas station for supplies when I heard glass shatter. I hid under the counter, holding my breath. I could see their boots inches from my face. One of them muttered something about orders are to capture if possible, terminate if necessary. That was enough to confirm I was definitely on their hit list. I guess I was naive to think I could outrun them indefinitely. Either they have a method to track infected individuals, or they have access to phone records, security cameras, whatever the government's clandestine services can tap into. They're always right behind me. Which brings me to Richmond. I'd hoped to lose myself in a bigger city, but it's only a matter of time until they figure out where I've crashed. This house belongs to an old friend of mine, a fellow researcher named Dr. Kate Holliday. She's away at a conference in Europe, or so I hope. I found her spare key hidden by the porch and let myself in. The place was ransacked. Someone must have gotten here first. I don't know if it was looters or the cleanup crew. Nothing but empty cabinets and scattered furniture. The last couple of days, I've tried to gather any gear or data that might help me. I found an old laptop in the closet. It's missing a charger, so no luck there. I located some antibiotic ointment, which won't do much against the virus, but it helped prevent a bacterial infection in my bite wound. I also found a dusty generator in the garage. It won't start, so no electricity from that. I'm in the dark. Every time I hear a car door slam outside, I nearly jump out of my skin. The only reason I haven't been discovered yet is that the neighborhood itself is half deserted. Many folks might have evacuated after hearing bizarre rumors or experiencing early outbreaks. In the distance, I've seen silhouettes of people skulking around, sometimes dragging their feet. I can't be sure, but they might be infected, or maybe just terrified civilians. I dread the moment I black out at the wrong time. The infection is picking up speed. The last injection was about 6 hours ago, and I feel the fever building again. My temples throb, my throat is parched, and my vision blurs at the edges. Sometimes I catch myself looking at my arms and legs like they're foreign objects. but I will keep talking as long as I can. Let's address the timeline. Today is Tuesday, 11:15 p.m. That gives me roughly until Friday night. If my supply holds out, and if the infection doesn't accelerate. If you're hearing this after that date, it means I didn't make it. But you need to know the truth about Project Varanus. It was developed under the guise of advanced immunotherapy. It has the capacity to rewire a living human brain in less than 4 days. It was originally designed to replicate itself in a controlled manner, but it mutated. The people who authorized it see all of us as collateral. There's more. Potentially the virus can be airborne if given the right conditions. So far, we only have documented proof of fluid transmission. But with each mutation, the risk grows that it may turn airborne. If that happens, I can't even fathom the consequences. Now I'm going to talk about how I ended up bitten in more detail, so you understand that it wasn't just negligence on my part. The subject who bit me, Subject 14 as the lab had labelled him, was a 46-year-old male named Wesley Jenkins. I learned that name because I found his medical file on a cart outside our containment area. He was a construction worker from Pensacola, Florida, with no significant medical history. He had moderate hypertension, no prior neurological issues, no chronic illnesses, perfectly ordinary on paper. He'd been exposed to the virus for just under 72 hours. At first, he developed a typical fever, chills, and extreme fatigue. Then came an odd rash along his forearms, creeping up toward his shoulders. By day 3, his neural scans showed abnormalities in the frontal lobe, specifically around areas that control inhibition. That's when he started attacking people. I suspect he was delirious and terrified, but we'll never know his final coherent thoughts. On the day he bit me, I was finishing a neurological assessment. He was strapped to a hospital bed. His breathing was ragged, and his eyes fluttered open and shut like he was in a deep, fitful dream. Suddenly, the lights flickered off. Panic erupted. I heard something snap. It was one of the bed's restraint buckles. Then he lunged. The pain was blinding. One of the security staff shot him with a tranquilizer dart, but it was too late. My blood was already dripping onto the cold floor. I remember stumbling through the corridors, searching for a medical kit. Each step felt heavier than the last. I wanted to believe I could just apply disinfectant, wrap the wound, and keep going. But deep down, I knew the virus was already coursing through me. It's not the type of pathogen that politely waits for you to treat the bite. It hits fast. My only advantage was that I'd been developing a prototype inhibitor. I wasn't supposed to test it on humans yet, but I had no choice. I injected myself on the spot. That gave me a narrow window. Time enough to escape. Time enough to try and outrun the storm. In the days since, I've discovered that the inhibitor can reduce some symptoms, but it's no cure. Meanwhile, I've had to stay one step ahead of the special forces teams or clandestine squads, or whoever they are. I've seen them operate. They communicate with coded language, but I've picked up a few keywords. Asset acquired, sector compromised, and terminus protocol. None of it sounds hopeful. They've got a mission: locate, contain, and eliminate, no matter who stands in their way. I suspect they might have a portable virus detector, something that picks up on specific biomarkers. That's how they keep tracking me, because it's not just random chance they show up wherever I am. I've changed clothes 100 times, tossed my phone, avoided using credit cards, and hidden in remote areas. Still, they find me. The only explanation is some kind of advanced tracking. Let me backtrack a bit. After leaving the Florida Panhandle, I hitchhiked with a truck driver who was hauling produce up I-95. A kind man named Charlie. He never asked many questions, just saw I was in trouble and offered a ride. I didn't tell him about the virus or the danger. I couldn't risk it. But I kept my distance from him, never let him see my wound. I was paranoid about transmitting this thing. The entire ride, I was on edge, convinced the cleanup crew would ambush us. We parted ways near Savannah, where I continued on foot. I never saw him again, and I pray he's safe. It's nerve-wracking to think about how easily I could have infected someone else if I'd lost control. That's part of the horror here. It only takes one slip, one scratch or bite, one moment of lost consciousness, and the virus leaps to a new host. That's why I'm terrified to stay around people for too long. I'm safer alone, though safe is a relative term. Now, about these blackouts, I keep notes on them in a small notepad. That's what I do whenever I come to. Let me read a few entries to give you a sense. Day 1, 10:25 a.m. Blackout lasted 10 minutes. Found myself by the road with no memory of how I got there. Day 2, 6:40 p.m. Blackout lasted 15 minutes. Woke in an abandoned barn, rummaging through crates. Day 3, 2:15 a.m. Blackout lasted 25 minutes. Came to in an overgrown field, intense headache, metallic taste in mouth. No memory. Each time I have no idea what happens during those intervals. I don't know if I'm wandering aimlessly or if I'm doing something worse. I have no injuries or stains that aren't mine, which is a small mercy. But the fear remains. The virus is slowly taking over. Let me shift to the bigger picture. The rumor in the lab was that Project Varanus was part of a broader initiative going back decades, possibly to the Cold War era. Bioweapons, super soldier programs. It's all the stuff of spy novels, but it seems there was a kernel of truth. My colleagues and I discovered documents referencing an old Department of Defense project called Armored Shell, where scientists tried to enhance human endurance by tweaking genes. That project apparently failed. But the research didn't just disappear, it led to new avenues, culminating in this twisted venture of artificially engineered viruses. I can't speak to every detail. I only know what I gleaned from scouring internal files and hearing whispers in corridors. Yet I'm certain of one thing. Once the virus spread to actual human hosts, it was unstoppable under normal quarantine procedures. And once it escaped the lab, the only recourse the government had was to hush everything up. That's what they're doing, cleaning up the evidence. Not just infected victims, but also any scientists, doctors, or staff with direct knowledge. And that's how I ended up on a kill list. I keep thinking of my family. My parents passed away years ago, so at least they won't witness me succumbing to this. But my younger sister, Tara, teaches middle school in Fairfax, Virginia. I want to reach out, warn her, but I can't. If I contact her, the cleanup crew might trace me to her, or worse, I might lose control and infect her. So I stay silent. It tears me up inside. I'm noticing my body temperature is climbing again, so I'll take a break to inject the second-to-last vial of the inhibitor. It stings like crazy, but the relief is almost immediate, like a wave of cold water washing over fevered skin. I can think clearly for a few more hours. Then the cycle starts again. I've decided I need to keep moving, even at night. The men tracking me have advanced thermal imaging. If I stay here in one spot, it's only a matter of time. Maybe my next stop will be Washington, D.C., ironically the heart of the very system that created this mess. Part of me wants to break into a major news network and broadcast what I know, but that's a fantasy. I'd never make it past the lobby. Another idea is to try to get to the CDC in Atlanta, but that's in the opposite direction, and I suspect they're compromised too. I've heard rumors the CDC is under partial military control now, investigating a new strain of influenza. A convenient cover story. Sometimes I think about traveling west, maybe finding a remote cabin in the Appalachian Mountains. But I doubt that solves anything. The virus is bigger than me, and the cleanup crew has resources I can't match. For now, I'll plan a path north and see if I can outrun them for at least another day. If I succeed, maybe I can pass these recordings to someone who can do something with them. If not, well, consider this my last will and testament. I woke up in a sweat this morning, having lost another half hour to a blackout. According to my watch, it was 4:15 a.m. when I last remembered checking the time, and when I regained awareness, it was nearly 4:45. I found myself in the living room, crouched behind a chair, as if hiding from something. Maybe I heard the sound of an engine outside. I can't be sure. My only certainty is that these blackouts are worsening. I left the house through the back door, slipping into the narrow alley behind the row of townhomes. The moon cast a pale glow over the roofs. The entire neighborhood felt eerily silent, as if the slightest noise might bring a swarm of trouble. I headed toward Interstate 95, sticking to side streets. On one of those back roads, I passed a destroyed police checkpoint. The barrier arms were snapped, and bullet casings littered the asphalt. I couldn't tell if it was connected to the outbreak or something else. In times like these, chaos can have many faces. I took a quick look around for any leftover supplies, but only found an abandoned radio, its battery corroded. Useless. As I walked, I tried to recall everything I knew about the virus's progression. Usually subjects lose coherent speech by day 4. Some morph into hyper-aggressive shells of themselves, while others degrade more slowly, exhibiting confusion and partial mania. The real hallmark is the necrosis that begins in the extremities, fingers and toes, then moves inward. Yet the victim remains alive, at least in a clinical sense. If the virus doesn't destroy them outright, it hijacks their nervous system. That's when their eyes become cloudy, and they move almost robotically, guided by base impulses. They have no fear, no sense of self-preservation. The only advantage I might have is my partial immunity, but how long it holds up is uncertain. Every day, I feel the virus gaining ground inside me. The blackouts, the fevers, the memory gaps. These are signs that the virus is winning. I walked until sunrise, staying off main roads. Richmond gradually gave way to a suburban sprawl. I navigated with simple means, following overhead signs whenever I neared a highway. My plan was to reach Fredericksburg, a smaller city about an hour south of DC by car. On foot, it could take me a couple of days. Around midday, I heard the roar of a helicopter. Ducking behind a row of trees, I spotted a black chopper circling overhead, scanning the ground with a spotlight. It looked too sleek and well-equipped to be a news helicopter. I held my breath, praying it would move on. After what felt like an eternity, the helicopter veered away. I'm positive it was part of the cleanup crew's operations. They're searching wide areas, likely for infected clusters. Possibly for me. I pressed on. My legs ached, and my arm throbbed where the bite had left its mark. The makeshift bandage needed changing. Unfortunately, I had no fresh supplies, so I tore a strip from my shirt and replaced the old wrap. The wound looked worse, with angry veins branching out from the bite. It smelled faintly of decay. I doused it in antiseptic from a small bottle, hoping to stave off a secondary infection. One moment that stands out, passing a deserted playground. Swing sets squeaked in the breeze, an empty slide glinted in the sun. No children, no laughter, as if the world decided to hide. I wondered how many people had fled or been evacuated. The effect was ghostly. I finally reached an abandoned motel by early evening. The sign read, "Sunrise Inn," though then flickered with a dying light. I ventured inside, found it empty aside from scattered suitcases and overturned chairs. The desk clerk's station had a half-finished coffee cup, now cold and grimy. I rummaged for anything useful. Miraculously, I found a vending machine that still had some bottled water. I used a crowbar left by someone else to pry it open. Managed to retrieve a couple of waters and snack bars. In the manager's office, there was a small first aid kit, enough to replace my bandages. Best of all, I found a dusty old laptop charger that almost fit the laptop from Kate's place. I stuffed it in my pack, praying I could rig something workable later. If I could power that laptop, maybe I could compile my evidence into a single file and leak it online. As night fell, I dared not use the ground floor rooms, too easy to breach. I found a janitorial closet upstairs. It had a lock on the inside. I barricaded the door with a chair. That's where I am now, recording this entry. I'm hoping to catch a little sleep, but rest is elusive. My mind cycles through worst-case scenarios. If I succumb during the night, if the cleanup crew storms this place, if I lose control and hurt someone, no outcome looks good. In a perfect world, I'd have a helicopter to fly far away, or a hidden bunker with advanced medical equipment to cure this. but the real world is less forgiving. All I can do is survive one more day and keep telling this story. Let me talk about the government's role. People often imagine a monolith, but it's not. It's a collection of agencies, each with its own agenda. Project Varanus seems to have been spearheaded by a specialized defense unit. Funding came from black budgets that bypass typical oversight. I'm guessing the official line was that this research would give the US a strategic advantage in biological warfare, specifically the ability to incapacitate enemy combatants without conventional battles. The idea might have been to spread the virus in an enemy territory, watch it tear through their population, and then contain it. But viruses aren't so easily contained. They mutate, they escape. They do what viruses do best, spread uncontrollably. I wish I could say the plan was cancelled once it became apparent how dangerous it was, but from what I witnessed, the opposite happened. They doubled down, demanding more tests, more data. The final straw was unleashing it on unsuspecting humans, whoever they might have been. Morality was discarded. Now an entire clandestine apparatus is cleaning up. And guess who's in the crosshairs? Every scientist who saw too much, every staffer who survived the meltdown at the Florida facility, and every curious journalist who pokes around. They're probably labeling it as domestic terrorism or biohazard containment. The public remains clueless, fed a steady diet of misinformation about contaminated water or a mysterious flu. Without overwhelming evidence, who would believe otherwise? I'm running out of time and energy. My head is spinning, and the fever is back. I can't inject the last vial until morning, or I won't have enough time to get far tomorrow. I need to ration it. One more day. Just make it until tomorrow. I'll try to sleep. If I make it, I'll record another entry. I woke up at dawn, drenched in sweat. Felt like I'd been running a marathon in my sleep. My body is racked with aches, and my arm is trembling. If I'm not careful, I'll drop this recorder. I have to focus. I injected the final dose of serum AB3. My last chance. The relief is immediate, but I know it won't last more than half a day. After that, the floodgates open, and the virus can take me. I need to move now. For breakfast, I choked down a stale protein bar and water. Not gourmet, but enough to keep me going. I rummaged through the motel manager's office once more. Found a jerry can with a little fuel. Could be useful for starting a fire or fueling a generator if I find one. Also discovered an ancient set of room keys, though it's unlikely they'll help now. The place is deserted and I won't linger. Before leaving, I tried plugging the laptop charger into Kate's laptop. The connector didn't fit perfectly, but with a bit of force, I got a charging light to blink. The screen powered up briefly, saw her name on the startup screen. Then it died again. I might have damaged the port, no time to tinker. The cleanup crew could roll up any minute. So I packed everything and set off, planning to reach Fredericksburg. If I do, maybe I can find a safe spot to attempt repairs later. Fredericksburg is about 50 miles north. I doubt I can make it in a single day's hike, especially in my condition. Still, I pressed on, ignoring the protests of my legs, one step at a time. I kept to rural roads, farmland, and small neighborhoods, staying out of sight. Sometimes I heard barking dogs or glimpsed flickers of movement through thick trees. Near a broken farm fence, I saw a figure hunched over something. It was about 40 yards away. The figure moved jerkily. I backed away, heart pounding, thankful it hadn't noticed me. By mid-afternoon, I was drained. The serum was wearing off, and a headache pounded behind my eyes. I staggered into a small patch of woods, found a tree to lean against, and closed my eyes for a moment. Next thing I knew, I jolted awake. A half hour gone. Another blackout. My watch read 4:37 p.m., so at least 30 minutes vanished. No recollection. My knuckles were scraped, and I had dirt under my nails, as if I'd been clawing at the ground. I stared at my hands, trembling. This can't go on. I forced myself onward. Eventually, I stumbled upon a highway sign indicating Ashland, Virginia. roughly 15 miles south of Fredericksburg. A truck stop lay ahead. Parked out front were black SUVs and at least 6 men in tactical gear. They questioned a father and teenage son, who shook their heads. The men let them go. Unusual, but perhaps they didn't match the profile. Then the men regrouped, scanning the horizon. They were definitely searching. I had to circle far around. My heart pounded, worried the slightest misstep in the brush would give me away. After an hour, I cleared the perimeter and kept moving until I came upon a set of derelict buildings. A defunct auto repair shop, rusting cars out front. I found a small cinder block shed out back, carefully stepping over broken glass. It reeked of mold and gasoline. I covered the windows with a tarp. That's where I stayed, recording again. An engine rumbled outside at one point, a black SUV creeping along. I held my breath, certain they'd see me. But they drove on. I realized I was clutching the recorder so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Another near miss, each one leaving me weaker. The next time I might not be so lucky. Night descended and I knew I needed rest. But I was also aware that once I slept, I might wake up a different person, or not wake at all. The serum was gone. This was the first night I'd faced the virus without any medical defense. If the fever took me in my sleep, if I blacked out too long, I might awaken consumed by primal hunger. The stories from the Florida site said some turned cannibalistic. I still won't use sensational words, but the horror was real. And now I'm a hair's breadth away. I decided to force myself to stay awake, occupying my mind by recounting every detail. That's what I'm doing, hoping it'll keep me conscious. If my voice slurs or I drift, forgive me. Time is a blur. Every minute is borrowed time. I keep thinking about the lab data I left behind. Hard drives, notebooks, surely destroyed or confiscated by now. This testimony may be all that remains. My head is pounding. I'm stopping for now. If I make it through the night, I'll continue. Night pressed on. I lost track of how many hours I paced around that auto repair shed, fighting off waves of nausea and disorientation. My thoughts grew jumbled, half-formed illusions colliding with reality. By around 3 a.m., I couldn't fight the pull of exhaustion any longer. My body craved rest, even if it meant risking everything. When I awoke, morning light streamed through the cracks in the cinder blocks. My watch said 8:12 a.m. I'd lost over 5 hours. My head felt like someone had driven nails into my skull. I was so dehydrated that my lips were cracked. I reached for my water bottle, only to discover it was empty. Had I drunk it during my blackout? Spilled it? There was no sign of a puddle. A chill rippled through me. Had I done something else during that lost time? The fever was back in full force. My forehead felt like a furnace, and my bite wound ached with every heartbeat. I needed water, and I needed to move. Lingering here spelled disaster. I set out, hugging quieter roads parallel to the interstate. Occasionally, I glimpsed cars speeding north, oblivious to the storm gathering in the shadows. By late afternoon, the sky had grown dark with looming clouds. I came upon a small urgent care clinic in a strip mall parking lot, deserted except for a few abandoned vehicles. Desperate for supplies, I forced my way in through cracked glass doors. Inside, the waiting room was in disarray. Overturned chairs, scattered pamphlets. I found a locked cabinet of medications, rummaged through a ring of keys, and discovered a box of vials labeled Enaclivir A32, an experimental antiviral. Infected footsteps sounded nearby, so I grabbed what I could and fled. Outside, a heavy rain began to fall, lightning crackled, and I ducked behind a dumpster to inject myself with the drug, hoping it would slow the virus. Pressing on through the storm, I eventually sought shelter in a deserted rest area. That's when I heard the rumble of an engine, and black-clad figures entered, sweeping the building with flashlights. I hid, but an accident knocked over a brochure stand. They opened fire. I bolted into a restroom, climbed through a tiny window, and tumbled outside into the storm. Bullets whizzed past. I ran into the night, ducking through the woods until I found a collapsed hunting blind to huddle in until dawn. At first light, I moved out again, my clothes still damp, my body trembling. My watch had died, so I could only guess the hour. My wound felt marginally improved. Maybe the antiviral was working. By midday, I reached a bend in the Rappahannock River, near Fredericksburg. I spotted a rundown marina, found a battered skiff, and managed to start its engine with a leftover can of fuel. That's when 2 armed civilians confronted me, demanding to know if I was infected. After a tense standoff, they let me go, warning me to leave quickly. I steered the boat upstream, rain still falling, though the storm's fury had dimmed. Eventually, the fuel ran out, and I drifted to shore, forging into a dark stretch of wilderness. Night came, and I found a gravel path leading to a ramshackle cabin. Exhausted, I pried open a window, holed up inside, and recorded the day's events, voice unsteady, breath ragged. I have no illusions. The cleanup squads are out there, methodically combing the region. The infected keep spreading, hidden behind official lies. And I'm on borrowed time, an infected immunologist with only half measures of hope. Each blackout draws me closer to the edge. But as long as I can still speak, I'll keep sharing every detail of this nightmare, hoping someone out there will hear. If these words find you, heed my warning. This virus isn't a rumor, it's real, and it's designed to spread. Stay vigilant, protect those you care about, and don't trust sanitized stories on the news. I was bitten. I only have so many hours left, but I'll keep fighting until I lose the last shred of my humanity, or until the squads track me down for good. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.